Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started here. It's right at 3:30 Eastern, so I believe that's the time we're supposed to start. Welcome to my session on how to be an effective open source project participant. And I'm looking forward to this one. This is actually a bit of a repeat of a session that I did at a previous DNN Summit, and it went over so well. I figured I would do it again and try to help some people out with things, especially as it relates to GitHub. So for those of you that do not know me, I am David Poindexter, also affectionately known as DNN Dave. Be sure to visit dnndave.com and my YouTube channel, and please do subscribe to the YouTube channel because I'm going to be doing a lot of content over the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. I am the CEO of Imaginative. We are a creative marketing and app development firm located in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. I am the strategy lead for DNN leader in the DNN leadership team, getting a little tongue-tied here. I'm on the board of directors for DNN Connect and co-president of the Southern Fried DNN Meetup Group. Various ways in which you can connect with me are down at the bottom there, as well as with our company Envisionative. So what are we going to cover in this session? We're going to talk a little bit about what open source is and why in the world you should care. And if you are like many that are entering into this open source age that we're in, at some point you're going to say, but I don't get it. You know, what the heck is Git and what is GitHub and what does all this terminology mean? And why is everybody so obsessed with it, using it and so forth? We're going to go over a lot of that. But I'm going to try to get through the slides as quickly as possible because I want to do some hands-on things and really show a few people about kind of how to interact with GitHub a little bit more in a granular fashion. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can contribute even if you're not a dev, because let's face it, GitHub is here to stay, Git is here to stay, and you can participate in ways that aren't just code. And we're going to talk about some of those. So let's talk a little bit about what open source is and why in the world you should care. Well, open source is commonly referred to as just free software. Well, that's not always the case, right? Open source is where the code is being shared, and depending on the licensing model that's been placed on that code, it may be able to be freely used. But a lot of times, especially on larger projects and so forth, there's a lot of effort that goes into these solutions that people make. And so sometimes the contributors of those or creators of those solutions can be supported via some kind of structuring or sponsoring structure like GitHub sponsors or Patreon or something like that. But I don't think we really need to have that mentality of open source is just free. Well, it is, and some of it you can use for free and even for commercial use. But that's not really the heart behind it, so to speak. So it's really about the source code being open for you to be able to see it and work with it and interact with it. So anyways, that's just a little bit of encouragement because we run into this quite a bit, where people kind of treat it as if you're a company making tons of money with this software and, hey, you need to fix the issue that I found. Well, I mean, it's open source. That means you can participate in that open source project. You can contribute to it. You can help you with giving information about the issue. So there's just ways that we can interact with those that are maintaining these projects, and DNN platform being a huge one, right? Anytime that you have an issue with DNN platform, well, long gone are the days that there's this corporation, behind the whole thing and everything flows through a team of engineers and all that. Well, that's just not been the case for a long time. Even though it's been open source for, since the beginning, it now truly is open source in the sense that it's community driven and so forth. So anytime that you have an issue, just remember that these are volunteers that are out there that are working hard and passion work for something that they love and they care about and they want to support. So anything that you can do to help make their life easier, either for you to contribute code, or if that's not your expertise, at least giving them the information they need in order to be able to replicate an issue or something like that. So a little bit about open source. We could talk all day just about that, but well, where in the world does open source live? We've gone through many iterations of open source platforms, and that allow developers to share code and so forth. You may remember back in the day, DNN being on. Oh my gosh, my brain just now had a lapse. Um, what was it on? Pilatus, you're in this room. What was that called? Mm, yep, I can't even remember, but it was before GitHub days, right? And we ultimately went to GitHub, but what was it? I've got code project stuck in my head, but no, it was something else. That's going to bother me for quite some time. So if anybody knows the answer to that one, put it in there. That's your DNN Jeopardy trivia question for this particular session. Codeplex. That's it. Sorry, it just came to my mind. But there's been a bunch of different kinds of platforms out there to be able to share code on, as well as to go and find code and use it and get it and interact with it. And they have pros and cons to each platform. So GitHub has just kind of evolved as one of the more popular ones that are used in the open source communities. So we'll do a little bit of focusing on that. But most likely, you have at some point hit a brick wall. Like, yeah, I see it, but I don't know what in the world this is or why it's the way that it is. It just seems really confusing. Maybe you are a developer and you've come from a more traditional, older source control platform like something like Visual Source Safe, or in later years, TFS, and Git just seems to be so different, right, than the way that worked. Same concepts, of source control and versioning and things like that, but just the flow of things may seem quite a bit different, and you find yourself up against a brick wall trying to wrap your head around how this works. Terminology is different, semantics are different, and so forth, and you may find yourself pulling out your hair quite a bit and throwing things around and wanting to drink more coffee so that you could try to understand it even a little bit more. And ultimately, you just like, I just don't get it. Well, I'm here to tell you, don't be afraid of the force. We're stuck with Git. It's here to stay. And in particular, you may hear these terms used synonymously, but they're not really the same. So Git is actually the system, the methodology, the way of doing things. It's actually the underlying technology tool, to do all this source control. But GitHub is just one implementation of a system that's built off of Git principles and Git, usage. So not really the same thing, but you're using Git when you're working with GitHub. Now, GitHub's done a fabulous job of, in the browser, being able to make a lot of that a little bit easier from a user experience standpoint, and some of the things that you can do in more common terminology, in the browser, like new issue or whatever. Things like that are extra things that are kind of handled in their experience, but you may have used like GitLab and my dog is barking. Hold on just a second. I have to tell him to hush. He is excited because somebody is walking by with a dog. What was I saying? Yeah, so some of their user experience is a little bit different where you may have gone to Bitbucket and it be similar, but not exactly the same as GitHub. All of these are built off of Git, but they have their own kind of opinions of how users can interact via the browser and so forth. So, what are some of the ways that GitHub is used that's not just for source code? Because we've all seen crazy code, living out there in some repository on GitHub, and that's what we think of maybe when we think of GitHub. But that's not really the only use for GitHub or Git. A lot of people, think of an author that is writing a book and they want to organize their pages of the book. I've actually seen GitHub repos set up for authors, to make their open source book, and their writing be more available or digestible in a source controlled fashion. Just thinking of the benefits of that, having such a rich history of versioning and so forth of their book, it'd be a great way for publishers to work with that. I've seen people, like doing presentations like I'm doing right now, making those available on a GitHub repo, or design work or processes that you or your company leverage to be able to get stuff done, and you need a place to store those in a easily consumable fashion, either through private use within your organization, or in a public way where other people can contribute to those processes and evolve those over time, or workflows that you may use, or documentation. I mean, think about things like DNN docs. Well, yeah, it's code, and there is a build system and all that, but it's documentation. So, I mean, it could be literally just a bunch of Word documents that are sitting out there, or Pages document if you're on Mac OS. So, there's a lot of use for Git and GitHub that is not just code focused. So you don't have to be a coding guru in order to be able to leverage some of the benefits of Git, and being able to version things and so forth like that. Being able to hear the community's feedback on particular things, or um, resolve issues, or plan out things. We'll see a little bit later kind of how you can leverage the projects feature to be able to plan out your projects or your next version of things. So why do developers love it so much? Well, it's kind of a love-hate relationship for a lot of developers, especially at the beginning, but it is based on Git, and that is a known open source tool itself. Very powerful, and offers a lot that older source control systems did not offer. So it has become very popular because of that. And GitHub in particular has done a great job with their user experience in the browser, like I mentioned earlier. So it's quite evolved and popular. It's a great way to share projects for the developers. It's obviously a great place to store code, and you can do that in a public or a private fashion. So it's not just for open source. It could be used for your closed source projects as well in private repos. It retains all of the history. Every little thing that you do in the repository is logged. It's there in the history, and you can get back to any point in time with a bit of knowledge of Git. It's a great way to collaborate with others. Being able to work with other developers or designers or QA testers. I mean, just all sorts of ways in which you can use it as an interaction tool and even a project management tool to really kind of plan things out. And of course, us developers have a bit of ego from time to time, so it's a great way to show off our mad skills, right? So let's talk a little bit about the terminology of GitHub and some things that you may see out here and may help you a little bit piece together some things. So we've got a repository, or people refer to as a repo, short for repository. It's really just a place that is designated for a particular collection of files. That's all there is to it, nothing more. we've got code that lives in a repo, right? And each code change can be committed. So we see the term commits. Branches are simply just, there's a lot more to this, and I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but there is a wonderful video out there that Daniel Veladas actually referred me to. It's Fear Not the Shah, SHA. And for those of you who are geeks and really like the details of how Git really works, that is a wonderful video. I'll see if I can, maybe if Daniel's still in this particular session, he can post the link to that video there. That would be awesome. If not, I'll try to remember it myself. Branches are really kind of, think of those as like a way to take a copy of something that is in a certain state and put it over beside it and just name it something different. And then you can make changes over here. And if you want to, you can commit them back to the main branch. So you can have as many branches as you want within Git, and it's really powerful. And then we've got a concept of releases, where when you get to a certain state of the code or the files, I should have probably put files here, because in some of those non-code examples I showed earlier, it's really just about the state of those files. When you get to a certain state and you want to make a release, then there's that concept of making a release on GitHub as well. There's the concept of issues, and this one can be a little bit misleading. I know I was a little confused by this when I first started experiencing Git and GitHub. The concept of an issue is really just a way to document something that you want to see work differently, or maybe you want to have a conversation about it. I know in the early days, issues were kind of where you had conversations too. So let's just say you're trying to use a particular solution from a GitHub repo, and you just can't get it to work the way that you think it should work or whatever, and you just want to ask a question. Well, you would create an issue, even though it's not really an issue. It's just that you're having a challenge and you need some help, some support or whatever. Then you would post to create a new issue to be able to dialogue with other people in that particular community or the project maintainers to be able to learn. And those issues can be closed. So issues now are really used a little bit more for literally like issues. And there are other features out there in GitHub like discussion. You'll see some repos have a discussions tab. And that's a little bit more for just having kind of open discussions when you don't have a specific issue that needs to be followed up with. This is a big one, pull requests. What the heck are you guys talking about when you talk about pull requests? Well, think of this. Me as a developer that wants to contribute to a project that is living in GitHub, well, I have to have a local copy of that code, right, in order to work with it. So what the typical kind of way of doing this is and this is so mysterious for a lot of people, but it's actually way more simple than we think it is when we're first starting to think about it. So let's take DNM platform, for instance. Well, if I want to work with DNM platform on GitHub, what I would do is I would go out to the GitHub repo for DNM platform, and I would fork that into my GitHub account. So then I've got 2 copies of that repo, right? And then I would have a copy locally, which would be my local repo. So I would have 3 repos, essentially. I would have my local, I would have the main repo, which is what we often name as the upstream repo. And then I would have my origin repo, which is the forked repo that's on my account. And that's kind of the simple first baby steps, I guess, of really understanding how the repos work. But a pull request, if I made it, this is the DNN platform repo, and this is my forked repo on GitHub, and then this is my local here, I would make changes to my local. I would push that to my origin, which is my forked repo. And then I would say, it's almost like making a phone call up to the main repo and say, hey, I've got a branch over here that I want you to consider for merging into your code base. but it's over here on my little forked repo. Well, I would make a pull request from the upstream repo to pull my changes from my origin into it. And that's really what a pull request is just any request to pull code from another repository. That one's kind of a big one to wrap your head around. And then we got the concept of projects, and this is more of a project management tool. This within GitHub, some projects have these and some don't choose to enable those. But we leverage this on the DNN platform to track new issues that are coming in and the state of those issues in general. So if it's one that's awaiting triage, we use a board on the project, to be able to move those from awaiting triage to an enhancement or a feature or a bug. And we kind of categorize those, and then we have a closed. And different projects use these, or different repos, I should say, leverage projects in different ways, and some repos don't at all use those. So let's do something with GitHub so that or Git and in GitHub so you can kind of see how this works. So what we're going to do is I'm going to switch over to my browser, and we're going to use DNN docs as the basis of what we're going to do here. Okay. So one of the things I noticed before this session, I was thinking I need to do something simple with DNN docs, because ultimately this website is built off of a GitHub repo. So if we were to go out to github.com, let's see, DNN community and DNN docs, this is the GitHub repository for DNN docs. So I was thinking to myself, what simple change could we make out here to be able to show how some of this works? And I'll take a moment here just to say, if you have any questions as we go through some of this, we can make this pretty interactive, but post your questions in the Q&A tab over in the chat window on the right of this. Take a shot at asking the question in there. And what I would love to do is I could bring some people on screen if you have a question and wanted to verbalize this so that we don't have to deal with just chat. Would love to do that as well. Or if you have some tricks that you want to share that maybe help with some of this that I'm showing. So I was looking at docs and I was thinking, okay, what needs to be done? What's a simple change that we can make? So if we go over into the upgrades area, there's a suggested upgrade path. And this is maintained pretty well, but I noticed that the latest version was not here. I completely forgot to make an update to this repo to be able to state that we have 9.10.2, because you can jump all the way from any version prior or 9.3.2 and after, you can jump all the way to 9.10.2. So we need to update this document out here. And there's multiple ways we can do this, but that's one change we're going to make. And then we're also going to do another change, and I'll open this one up in a new tab. I'm going to open up references. And under here, there's a releases. And I noticed that the 9.10.2 release is not out there. So let's do this. So here I've got my browser open into the GitHub repo. And I have already forked this repo previously, but I'll show you where you do that. If you log into your GitHub account and you come to this page, you'll see up at the top right, there's a fork button. And all you do is just click that button. And if I click the button for me, it's going to ask me where I want to fork it. So any of the other organizations or accounts that I manage would be shown here. Well, I already see that I have made a fork of this on my personal GitHub repo. So my personal username on GitHub is David-Poindexter. So that's my username. And then DNN docs is the repo name. So I've already forked it. So if I were to go there, I would see this looks just like DNN docs, but notice up in the top left, it says David Poindexter, DNN docs, forked from DNN community / DNN docs. DNN community being the GitHub organization and DNN docs being the repo. So remember earlier where I was talking about kind of the 3 different repos that we have. Well, these are the 2 that live on GitHub. This one we'll call upstream, being the DNN community one. This one we'll call origin, okay, because this is, and you can name these whatever you want. You can call it left and right or up and down or sideways, whatever you want to call these. But a common convention is to call the primary repository the upstream, and your fork the origin. Okay, so now we've got that. So we'll pretend like I just forked that. And then I need to pull that locally. Well, I'm going to open up my PowerShell window. Now you can use command prompt, or you can use PowerShell, or you can use Bash, or whatever your preference is for terminal. If you're on Mac, you could use just the terminal, or PowerShell for Mac. There's all kinds of ways to do this. And I have a directory already set up that is a DNN docs directory. And if I list the files, you'll see I already have the files here. Well, this on my local machine, this is in my C:\dev\DNN docs directory. This is my local repo or repository, my Git repository. So that's the 3 environments now. We've got the upstream, and let me just do a command here. I am a big fan of the Git CLI or command line interface, but there are visual tools that you could also use. I just like the command line because I need to tell it exactly what I'm doing, and I can be verbose, and I could really, it was more for my learning experience than anything else. Now I find myself doing some of the things in the UI in a visual tool, like in Visual Studio Code. Wonderful Git features built into there. Same thing for Visual Studio. There's some nice features there where you can do a lot of this stuff in the UI, but I like to know the commands underneath those user interface kind of interactions, so that I know what I'm doing, and just understanding that. So I would, recommend that you do take the time to learn at least the basic commands that you'll be using most of the time. So I'm going to run a command here, this git space remote, and I'm going to put a -v there just to be verbose about it. I want you to see this concept of remotes. I have configured remotes for, remember I was talking about upstream and I was talking about origin? Well, my origin repo is that URL that I was showing you before, where it's my username /DNN docs. And then you'll see a .git on the end of it. You don't have to have .git on the end of them, but if you were to go in the browser and you were to click this code button and you were to look at the information that's in there, if I copy that, that's actually .git at the end of this. So it's just kind of by convention the way that they do it, but you don't have to have the .git on it. It just kind of what it is when you copy it here. So that's one way that you can set up your remotes, is you can come to the appropriate repository, click on the code, and then copy the HTTPS version of that. And then you can actually set up your local remotes that way. So like if I were to add a new remote, I could do git remote space add, and then whatever name I want to call it, let's just say foo. And then I could paste that URL. I just did a Control-V, by the way, from what I copied into my clipboard. And then that would be kind of like, just like the upstream is, but then I would have another remote named the same thing. So if I click enter, and then I run my git remote -v again, you'll see that I have 3 remotes now, one of which is called foo. Now, the reason we name these is so that we can use these in various commands without having to type out the entire URL. So that helps a lot. So what I want to do here is I've got it cloned here locally. I've cloned the repo, and you may be asking, well, what in the world are you talking about now? You just talked about other things, but now you're talking about cloning. What in the world? I got to learn that. Well, any repo that you go to on GitHub, you can click on this and you can grab this URL and you can actually clone it. Now, the way you do that in Git, if I didn't have this directory at all, I would just run git space clone, and then I would paste that URL there. And what that's going to do without any other options is it'll create a DNN docs folder wherever you are, so I don't want to do this here because that would put another copy of the DNN docs repo into a subfolder under my repo. So I don't want to do that. But if I were starting from scratch, then I would go into whatever parent folder I wanted, and I would just run this command, and it'll automatically create that DNN docs folder for me. If I want to clone a repo into an existing folder that I manually set up, I could just use space dot at the end of it, and that says clone it into the directory that I'm in right here. So that's kind of how I got started in my local repo and set it up from the beginning. So now that I've got my local repo, I've got my forked repo, and I've got the upstream repo, I'm ready to start working. Now, we talked about branch earlier. So I'm going to create a branch because I'm on main right now. That's our main branch. So you can do git branch to see all the branches you have. And I only have main local because that is the primary branch that's out on the main repo, or the upstream repo, I should say. Terminology gets wild when you're talking about all this. Main used to be called master. Now it's called main. Yada, yada. There's a lot of different things that we use. So we have to be careful the way we talked about it and how we name things. Because semantically, it's good to really understand. A branch is different than a repo, right? Okay. So we got main, but I want to do a temporary branch locally to make this change. So I'm going to do git checkout. Now, checkout is a command in Git to be able to check out an existing branch or to create a new branch. So if I don't do a -b, then it's going to just check out to another branch that I have. Well, I only have one branch here, it's main. So I want to create a new branch. The B is for branch. And then I want to call that, let's see, upgrade path. And this can be called anything you want to. It just can't have spaces in it. So this is just the name, and it's going to show up in my list of branches here. But I'm going to do upgrade path because that's the document that I want to work with. So now what it's done is it's switched. Notice I've got my PowerShell stuff set up here to where it'll automatically tell me what branch I'm on. So it's already created a copy, essentially, a copy of main into a branch called upgrade path. So now I'm ready to start doing my work. And if I did that get branch again, now you would see I have 2 branches, main and upgrade path, and the selected one is asterisk. So now I can open up the code and work with it. Now, one thing I didn't mention is before I started the session, I went ahead and I pulled the latest code from the main branch on the upstream. Let me just do that. Hold on, let me just back up. So pretend like I didn't do any of that stuff. I'm going to go check out the main. I'm not creating a new branch. I'm just going to switch back to the main branch. Before I get started, I want to pull upstream. That's the name of my upstream repo and the name of the branch that I want to pull, because I'm on main and I want to pull the upstream version of main to my local repo. So I would pull and it's not going to get anything because I'd already done it earlier. But if there were changes, you want to make sure that whatever you create a new branch from, you want to make sure that what you created it from is the latest version from the GitHub repo. So once I do that, I usually make sure that my origin, which is my forked version of the repo, is also up to date and in sync with the upstream. So the way I do that is locally, I'll just do once I pull from the upstream, I will push to origin the main branch. And it's not going to update anything either because I did that earlier. But that's kind of how I would get started. Then I would do my checkout with a new branch. So now I've already got that branch. So I'm just going to switch back to that upgrade path branch. So now we're ready to work. All right, so I'm going to open up VS Code, and this is just command to open up VS Code from the current directory. So now I am looking at the DNN docs project. I'm going to just close all these so that we can focus on exactly what we would need to change. So I need to find where that document is first. So if I go back out on the GitHub repo, excuse me, on the DNN docs site, then this is the page I want to change. You may not have known this, but we've got built in some really cool features here. So up here at the top right, if I want to improve this doc, I can click this and that'll take me to the GitHub repo, but specifically to the file that I need to change. And you notice that this is that file. It's just in Markdown, so it's not all nice and pretty like it is out on the actual site, but you can tell that this is the right document. So from here, I can actually look at my path here and tell where that file is located. So I'm looking under content, getting started, setup, upgrades, suggested upgrade path, and then an index.md file for Markdown. So that's the file that I want to change. So I'm going to switch back over to my Visual Studio Code. And let me get rid of some of these down here. Okay, so we need to go to content, getting started, setup, upgrades, suggested upgrade path, and there's the index Markdown file. And yep, this looks like it. This is just a bunch of Markdown. So what I want to do is I want to update this to 9.10.2. And then I need to change the URL to match where it is on the DNN platform repo, right? Because that's where we're referencing to. If we go back to the DNN docs website, you'll see that this links right over. So if I were to click and open this in a new tab, it would go to the 9.10.1 release on the DNN platform repo. So we need to make sure that that's correct, right? So if I go to releases out here, I've already found the 9.10.2 release. I just need to copy this URL, which is the same as the other. It's just that I'm going to change the 1 at the end to 2, right? So I'll go back over to my code, and the URL just needs to change to .2. And it's good to always test things like this, so you could actually just control click into this and see if that opens up into the right one, and it did. So there it is. So we know that link works. We'll go back over here. So we've made our change. Now I just need to save this file. So I'm going to do a Control S. Now I'm ready. I've made my change. I now just need to get that back up on GitHub somehow, right? So we're in my local copy. So what I need to do here is I need to go back over to my command line. And if we run a command called get status, we'll see what changes have been made. This is the beauty of Git. It keeps track of everything that you do. So it knows, oh, you changed that file. So what do you want to do? At this point, it's asking me. So it tells me I can use get add to update that, or phrase commonly called staging. We're going to stage this change locally so that we can then commit the change, which is kind of like saving in terms of Git any changes that we've made physically on the files. So we're going to do this. We're going to do git add. Now I could type out that file path there if I wanted to, but that's too much work. I know that everything it listed up here, I want to actually stage it for a commit. So I can do git add dot, and that says, go ahead and stage everything that's you've thought has changed, Mr. Git, and that's what we're going to do. So I'll do that. Now, what happened? Didn't look like anything happened, right? En contraire, if I do git status again, now you'll see that it's no longer modified. It's modified, but it's also green. It's staged for committing. So it says changes to be committed. See up here, it says changes not staged for commit. This is Git CLI, by the way, telling us all this stuff. So here now it is staged and it's ready to be committed. So now we can actually commit it. How do we do that? We run git commit, and then I'm going to add a message. Now I could just hit enter and it would be committed. The problem with that is we didn't like describe what we're changing, so that from a Git history standpoint, we know what we did, rather than having to look at the actual file and see the change, which we could also do. But here we're going to do git commit, and then I'm going to do a -m, which is for message. So we're going to add a message to our commit, and I'll put this in quotes. So I'm going to say something like updated version from 9.10.1 to 9.10.2 for upgrade path. And let me just do suggested upgrade path. That makes it more clear. Okay. Or clearer. All right. So now we're ready. I can just hit enter and now it's committed. Okay. Are you sure, David? Yep. I'm sure. Remember earlier when I referenced that video that Daniel Veladas referred me to about fear not the Shah? Well, part of that Shah, S-H-A, is these characters right here. It's just a portion of the Shah. These are 7 characters, but it's actually a lot longer in reality. But you can usually get to a unique commit by the Shah, right? So it actually says to me in the command line interface that it committed those changes, and here's the SHA for it, because everything in Git is a SHA. So now if I do git status, it'll actually tell me, well, there's nothing to commit. You've already committed it. But if I looked at my history, you could see that it was actually there. And I'm not going to go into that level of detail here. But what I've done is I've made sure I had the local copy up to date with the latest from upstream. I pushed it to origin just to make sure it was in sync. Then I did a checkout and created a new branch called upgrade path. And then we made the changes. And then I staged those changes locally so that they could be committed. And then we committed it. So now we're ready to actually push this. But where are we going to push it to? Well, we're going to push it to our fork, because that's our copy in GitHub land of the primary repository. So, and you're going to see how all this goes together in just a minute. So now I'm going to do a git push. I'm going to push it to our origin remote. Remember I listed the remotes earlier, and this is our origin remote here, because that's my forked copy of the upstream. Git push origin, and I'm going to name it the same branch name because that's one we want to push out there. I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see that it's actually pushing those changes to my repo out there. And look, it even tells me to create a pull request for upgrade path, that's the name of my branch, on GitHub by visiting this URL. We'll come back to this and we'll actually click it in just a second, but I want to show you. If I switch over to my browser now, and if I go to, let's go here, And let's go to our forked repo, right? Now I could have just typed this up here. But here, look, the browser says upgrade path had recent pushes 1 minute ago. Okay, so GitHub's pretty smart. It actually knew that I pushed a new branch out here. And this little menu here shows all the branches that I have out here. Yeah, I need to do some cleanup. But if I scroll down, oh, yep, there's upgrade path. So if I were to switch over to upgrade path and we were to drill down, oh, 3 minutes ago, there was a commit. Look, there's the SHA that was in our command line over here. So what is that? Ends with B5B. So we'll go back over here. Oh my gosh, yeah, B5BB. Oh, okay, so they're actually using let's see, this one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 characters from the beginning of the SHA. And GitHub is actually using not 8 characters, but they're using 7 characters. So that's why it's B5B, but it's AED, blah, 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 right? Notice in my hovering that, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of my browser, you will actually see the full SHA there right after commit slash. So we're just taking the first X number of characters. GitHub in the browser evidently uses 7 here. And locally, the CLI was using 8 characters. But yeah, it's the same commit. But it's out on GitHub though, right? It's in my branch that I just pushed out to my forked repo up here. So this is cool stuff. So now I have a couple of options. I could actually just click this, do a control click on this URL here, and it'll go ahead and start the creation of a pull request here. Because now that we've got this out on GitHub, we can create a pull request, which is basically like calling home up to the upstream and saying, hey, I've got a new change over here in my little forked repo. I want you to pull it and review it and see if you want to merge it into your main code base. Pretty cool stuff. So I could either click on that link from the command line interface, or I can come out here either on my forked repo or on the upstream. This is mind blowing, but let's go out on the upstream. Look, it changed this right here. It says, okay, on David-Poindexter : so that's my username, branch name, just had recent pushes 3 minutes ago. Do you want to compare what we currently have up here and go there? So yeah, whether I do it here or whether I do it on my forked repo, it's the same action in the end, because when I click this button to compare and pull requests, it will start the process of creating a pull request. Now, remember that commit message that I typed in earlier? That's what this is. So it automatically populates the title of your pull request. And if we look up here, this tells us a little bit about what we're making a pull request to do. We're saying, notice this arrow here, we're comparing David Poindexter's forked repo branch upgrade path against the upstream repo main, because we're saying, hey, main is your main branch up here. We want you to consider merging what we created over here into main. And I can scroll down and I can actually see, oh, well, there's the changed file. So on the left here, there's 2 different views. By the way, there's a unified and there's a split view. I like the split view because it shows the old version of the file on the left and the new version of the file on the right. So you'll notice that the highlighted, if I zoom in here a little bit, see that the highlighted portion is what changed. So what used to be 0, 1 here is now 0, 2 here. And what used to be 1 here is now 2 here. And it highlights the entire section of code that was changed, but there's another highlighting style for the actual characters that changed. So this is really cool. Now, in this case, there's not a whole lot for me to say, but I just will put something in here that makes sense. So update the suggested upgrade path based on the current release of platform. And that's all I need to do. And then I click create pull request. And now we have a pull request. Hopefully that demystifies it just a little bit for you, for how this works. And then as a maintainer of the upstream repo, and you're seeing that I have some of those insights because I'm actually one of the ones that'll review these kind of pull requests. We've got some automation that's happening here to check that it builds and that whatever changes were made didn't break the site. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Daniel Veladas has already looked at this and he says, okay, I approve it. So what he did is he looked over here at the files change tab. He says, yep, looks good. He did a review changes and he clicked approve. So if you have the rights to do that, I don't hear, Daniel, thanks for helping me out. I mean, that was a nice assist there. So he has approved it and he has also given me a taco because I love tacos. Thank you very much. And then once the build process finishes, this will go green and the maintainer will be able to merge that pull request, and that will automatically kick off those builds again and publish it to the website. So that was a lot to go through, but I wanted to go through that in detail because regardless of whether it's DNN Docs or if it's DNN Platform or some other repo that you're interested in on GitHub, the process is usually about the same for it. This will keep you from getting in too much trouble with Git. But, if you want to contribute, to documentation or even to some code, on various repos, this is the process that you're going to go through. Some of those repositories don't require that you have a forked repo and all that, but we have found that this is just really good practice to do it this way. It's a little bit of extra overhead to do those kind of things, but it's solid if you understand the principles of where things live and how it works and what a pull request and all this stuff is. Then it really becomes a whole lot more simple. So once all this finishes with the build process, we'll do something called merge, and it'll merge my branch into the upstream branch. So then it becomes the new main branch with that change in place. So it's really cool, neat way of doing it. So let's roll through it one more time, and please do ask questions in the Q&A tab over there if you do have them, and I'll be happy to bring anybody on screen to ask questions as well. Just pipe it up in the chat there. So let's do it again. Let's do one more here because we're going to go through it, but we're going to go through it a little bit quicker, and I won't go through all the excruciating details of all that. But let's update the releases page. This time, let's do it a little bit, quicker through this. So we come to the page that we see up. Yep, they haven't listed the latest release out here, so this page needs to be updated. So let's open this in a new tab and find out where it is. Okay, yep. So we're on the DNN Docs repo. It's in content reference releases. So I know where it is now. I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go back over to my command line and always remember where you are and what you're doing, because right now I'm on the upgrade path, right? So I don't want to be on that branch anymore. You may be tempted to go git checkout -b and releases or something like that, right? You don't want to do that because then we would be making a copy of our, okay, my screen is flickering here. Evidently Hopin doesn't like that. Okay. You might be tempted to do this, but you don't want to do that. You always want to start, or you hear some of us refer to it as basing your branch off of the latest version. So I don't know if that PR has been merged yet. Let's see here real quick. See if Daniel merged it. Nope, it's still running its build. But if this was already merged, then what we would do is we want to check out our main branch, right? that switches us back from upgrade path. And I want to keep my upgrade path here just in case Daniel looks at that and says, yeah, you're going to need to make a change there. You really messed that up. Then I'm going to want to keep this intact until that PR or press pull request has been merged. Then I can delete it locally. I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to check out main, and then I would do a get pull upstream main to make sure I have the latest and greatest. In this case, there's going to be no changes because that hasn't been merged yet. And then I would do a get push origin main to just make sure that it's in sync with the upstream main. Now I'm ready to, I'm on the main branch. So I want to base my new branch off of main, not off of upgrade path. Otherwise it'll get messy with Git because it'll stack those commits. So if I were to create a version or a new branch from upgrade path, you would see this commit as a part of the history on that. I don't know why my screen is flickering, but it is. Let me go back over here. Okay. Brian Dukes approved it as well. So we'll go back over here. Let's see. Now we'll need to do get check out a new branch, and we'll call this one releases. Remember, this can be called anything you want to. It's just a branch name. So I'll just do something that makes sense. So I'll do get check out new branch releases. Now I can open up my code, Visual Studio Code, and notice that in VS Code, you see what branch you're on in the bottom left here. So this is on the releases branch. So you can always kind of just double check and make sure that you're on the right branch. So this is not the document. Now I've already forgot the path, so I'm going to have to go back out here. We'll go to this. Okay, so content, reference, releases, index, MD. So we'll go content, reference, releases, index. There it is. Okay, so this looks like the right file to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that line, and then I'll just paste it there. Obviously, the information is different. We're going to have to look at for the release date, but I'll change that to 2. And we already know from the previous one what this needs to be, and that's 2. And I'm going to try to hurry because we're approaching the hour here. I just need to get the release date for this. Let's go out to here. Okay, so there's the release. There's the date. It was October the 19th of 2021. So we'll go back over here, 2021, 3-digit month, and the 19th. So I've made my change to the local file. I'm just going to save that. I'll do Control S. I'm ready. So now I'll go back over into the command line. I'll do get status just to see for sure that it tracked my changes, and it did. There's the file that I changed. So I'm going to stage that file by doing get add, and I'm just going to do dot because I want to add all the files that have changed. So I do that. Now I can do get status and see that it's green. Yay. So now I'm ready to commit it locally. So I do get commit -m and add 9.10.2 release to releases page or reference page. And then I'm going to hit enter. Now I'm ready to push it to my origin repo. So get push origin, and I'm going to name it the same branch, right? Releases. So I'm pushing my releases branch to the origin repo. And this time I'm going to click on this. So I'm going to do a control click, and it opened it. You just couldn't see that it opened. So there it is. It actually opened this tab, and it already put my commit message in the title. So now I'll just do a description. Added 9.10.2 release. And I'm going to scroll down just to make sure that's right. Yep, I double checked my changes there. It looks good. So I do create pull request, and voila, it's done. So that's really the process. And you can see the more comfortable you get with the commands. There's only a handful of commands that I had to learn. It's not that simple because you can get into trouble from time to time with Git, and you have to use some more advanced techniques. But you get the gist of how this works. Once you get the hang of it, you can really see how quickly things can flow. So there's tons of ways that you can contribute to open source in non-code ways as well. You can be an advocate of those open source projects. You can educate people on those projects. You can promote those projects. Maybe you want to be involved in the DNN awareness team, to really kind of help promote things out there, getting the word out. You can recruit people to get involved. Maybe you know a developer, maybe you know a designer, maybe you know a UX person, whatever the case may be. You can contribute to the knowledge base, in our case, DNN docs. You can get involved in design because some of these files are design related, they're style related. So it's not all just C# code, right? The user experience, maybe you have better ideas of the way things should flow in various aspects. Maybe you're a translator and you speak another language and you can help with translations and localization type things, or just posting issues out there, or helping with processes, or getting involved in meetups. And this is amazing. I'm wrapping up right at the hour. Many hands make light work. If you have any questions, feel free to ping me up directly or post them in the chat, and I'll hang out here for just a couple more minutes. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this session. I hope you found it helpful. And according to Daniel Blanes, it looks like got approved on that one. Let's see. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their conference. Yep, that one looks like it's approved. Let's see if the other one got merged here. It looks like it finished the build process, so it could be merged. So as an approver, I could do this, but I'll let one of the other approvers do that, and that'll actually kick off a build to take those changes live out there. So Daniel, if you're here, Daniel did it. Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. You're great. So now I will show this just for those of you that are still hanging out. Once that gets done, notice that GitHub prompted me I can now successfully delete my upgrade path branch that is on my forked repo. I don't need it anymore. It's been merged into main here, so I should delete it and keep it clean. So I can go ahead and do that. So I can also do that locally here as well. So I can do git branch to show all my branches, and I can do git branch. I'm going to do a -D to force delete it, and I can do upgrade path. So I can go ahead and delete that branch here and just keep things nice and clean here. That's pretty cool. So now that he's merged this, the way that we got the build process working here, if you go back to the main code tab, you'll see that it's running a job here. So here, once this job finishes, this is part of the process, and it'll actually push it out to GitHub Pages, which is hosting the actual site, and you'll see those changes live. So thanks a lot.
As we wrap up, David, if you don't mind me hopping in, we, as always, want to thank all of our sponsors for putting on the event, and of course, all of you for attending. So thank you very much.